Again, let me introduce you to the next speaker who's calling and joining us from Seattle. So thank you very much because it's
Hi.
kind of late for you guys there. So let me introduce to CK Wang. He's the co-founder, CEO of Kooapps, a indie studio, mobile game studio. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Stefan. Yeah, so my name is CK, and thank you so much for joining this talk. Today, as I'll be sharing our experience and a couple of indie survival tactics during the coronavirus. A lot has changed during these challenging times. A little bit more about myself. I went to school at Stanford, did my bachelor's and master's there, started working at Microsoft, started in the game studio, worked on Fable 2 with Peter Molyneux. That was really fun. And then moved to Microsoft Research, did machine learning for 4 years, then started teaching at UW, server-side web development, and then started Kooapps, a mobile gaming studio, and we make mostly hyper-casual games. And I think, I think everybody here, the indie dream is, make my favorite game growing up. And for me, it was Final Fantasy VII. And that's why I really left Microsoft in 2012, was to make the dream game I always loved growing up. And so, so game development, I think, in all of our minds sort of looks like this. You're jumping into the rainbow. It's going to be so much fun. It's going to be amazing. You're going to love the game you make. But game development in reality is probably more like this, where, for example, for myself, my background was in programming. I did CS, and now all of a sudden I need to take care of art, sound, server, metrics, marketing, monetization, and now, of course, the COVID-19. And so wanted to share a little bit of our experience during these challenging last couple of months. I think some of the trends, gaming trends we're seeing since March is, the first thing, the good thing is that usage is up. So we're seeing downloads and DAU and minutes per day up 20 to 60%. And that's great as people are staying home. They're playing more and more mobile games. LTV, on the other hand, has actually softened a little bit. And as a studio, we're 90% ad revenue. And so we have seen ad monetization CPMs soften about 10 to 30%, depending on the ad network. And actually in our experience as well, some countries LTV have tanked over 50%. And so so hopefully everybody here, you have you're able to look at your analytics and look at your LTVs per country and really dig into sort of which countries are hit more if you're doing UA, and definitely adjust those campaigns. Another trend we're seeing is that a lot of large companies are extra supportive. So Facebook and Google have announced ad credits. So I would highly recommend applying for those if you haven't already, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then lastly, I think last trend we're seeing is that given the economic uncertainty, it's actually a lot harder to fundraise, whether that's from VCs or from publishers and from banks. It's just harder to meet them and get funding, and I'll also talk a little bit about that. So welcome to indie survival tactics during coronavirus. So again, trend number one, usage is up 20 to 60%. So what do we do here? Let's get more users and let's re-engage them. So the first thing I highly recommend, and we do this a lot, is to optimize our app icons. Your app icon is the first impression of your game, and I would say it probably drives 60 to 80% of your downloads. So make sure it's an app icon that's catchy, that's simple, and that matches the emotion that you want to give. So for example, I would say Clash of Clans, in the game, you're sort of attacking other villages or other cities. And so in the app icon, the emotion there is something that's really angry, right? So they're trying to draw people that are angry, that are aggressive, so that when they join the game, they can build armies and attack each other. And that really matches the emotion that you'll have in the game. App icons, we've seen create up to a 30% uplift in conversion, and screenshots about 10%. And both of those are really, really good. Any sort of gain here is a gain sort of on unit economics and lower CPI, all great news. And I'd highly recommend using Google Play Dev Console to do the A/B test. It's automatic. You just upload an icon and it'll calculate confidence intervals and all of that. The second thing I'd recommend, and we do this, is to build on other platforms. This is a screenshot of Pick the Word on iMessage, and this is top free charts of all of iMessage. And iMessage is a less popular platform, but we're still able to get 2,000 organic downloads from iMessage. And because it's inherently viral, we've been able to maintain that for the past 4 years without doing any marketing on the my iMessage side. And so we also recently launched Apple Watch version of Pick the Word. We had, of course, because of the smaller form factor, we've had to redo a lot of the UI, but likewise also organic traffic there. So we'd recommend checking out other platforms. And of course, I think ASO now is pretty developed, but maybe unlike 5 years ago, it's kind of new. So definitely optimize, title, keywords, descriptions. And there's a lot of ASO companies out there, and we use GummyCube. We've been with them for the past 5 years. Highly recommend them. Check them out as well. And lastly, to get more users, re-engage them, re-engage your existing users, sending push notification, especially targeted ones, and ones with emojis. We've seen a plus 20% DAU uplift, and as well as running live events. I think live ops is a very proven way to re-engage your users, and always making sort of every week special in your game. And so we've actually have dialed up our live events. We used to be running maybe one a month. Probably like 6 months ago, but now we're running 10 a month in terms of live events. So highly recommend dialing up live events and making, grabbing attention and more rewards. If you have a mid-core game or casino game, I would also recommend checking out Facebook. Tenjin published a report saying that Facebook is the #1 re-engagement ad network, and so definitely check it out. Mid-core games and casino games tend to have longer LTV, and so they can afford their re-engagement campaigns. Trend number 2, lower LTV and CPMs. So what do we do here? We want to improve our monetization, right? So first thing is, if your game is IAP driven, highly recommend Piggy Bank and Battle Pass. If your game is a casual game, you should go with Piggy Bank. We implemented this and we saw 80% increase in in-app purchase revenue basically overnight. It was like 2 or 3 days later, but it was overnight after we shipped it, and so highly recommend it. If you're a mid-core game, I think Battle Pass, I think is pretty proven, and a lot of games have this. And here's a screenshot of Clash of Clans Gold Pass, and this source is from Sensor Tower. Sensor Tower published an article where Clash of Clans weekly revenue went up 145%. From their Battle Pass. So depending on which type of game you have, casual, mid-core, and if it's IP driven, highly recommend these two features as proven in-app purchase sort of boosters. However, as an indie game developer, in-app purchase tends to be challenging. And the reason it's challenging is because the percentage of spenders is very small. So in hyper casual, you're typically like 0.1% of users will be in-app purchase spenders. Casual games is maybe 1%. Mid-core games is 3%. And so with such a small number of users buying in-app purchase, you really need a large scale of users to be able to do A/B tests. Like if you want to A/B test like a bundle or like a pop-up messaging, like you really can't do anything scientific unless you have, hundreds of thousands of users, in which case, like let's say 1% of them buy, and so you have a few thousand purchases. And so that kind of gets expensive and pricey. And there's sort of attribution solutions to help with that, such as, Tenjin, AppsFlyer, Adjust, and a lot of analytics there to study. But I think overall, it's generally prohibitively expensive and difficult for indies. And so what's the alternative if in-app purchase doesn't work and it's too expensive? Advertising. And it's not sort of one or the other. We of course do both in-app purchase and ads, but because ads is way easier to scale for indies, we're seeing way more revenue. So here's an Ad Colony data where they published that basically 50% of the market's revenue is from ads, right? So there's a huge opportunity here to make meaningful revenue off of ads. In terms of ads, I'd say there's three most common ad units. The first one is Interstitials, and for us, that's about 50% of ad revenue. So these are full screen pop-ups, pretty easy to implement, and very commonly between levels. The next one is rewarded video. This is about like 40% of our revenue. And we actually think that this is the best user experience because it's opt-in. Users can choose to do it if they want to and not if they don't. So here is a screenshot of Pictoword on the right side. And if you watch rewarded video, you'll get 10 coins, which then you can use to buy hints in the game. And this works really well if you have an in-game economy to be able to allow users to not have to pay in-app purchase. Because again, only 1% of people in casual games want to spend any money at all. But if you do add that, be careful. It might cannibalize your in-app purchase. So try to sort of cap it by the number of impressions per day, for example. And that's really common. And we do that as well. Lastly is banner ads. This is about 10% of our revenue. It's low CPMs, but because it's always there, it's high number of impressions and sort of running in the background. And generating revenue for us. So the next thing is, so once we've added the ad units, what do we do next? How do we optimize it? The first experiment I would encourage everybody to try is to not be afraid to show ads and show ads earlier. I think the market from 5 years ago is now very different, especially with hyper casuals taking off, and our audience, our gamers now much more used to seeing a lot of ads. You can actually be more aggressive. So as an example, we moved showing our first ad impression inside Pictoword from level 16, which is like, in your second day, to level 4, which is typically in your first session. And from this change, we're actually able to boost revenue by 20%. And so this is going to be different per game. But I would say, don't be afraid to test moving your ads earlier and increasing your ad revenue. Another common way to show ads, interstitial ads, is when you have multitask ads. Generally, the experiments we've seen with multitask ads, they don't tend to do as well because this is like a user where they're coming back to your game and all of a sudden, you show them an ad before they can play. It's a little bit sort of jarring. And so we would recommend sort of 0.5 occurrences per user, but not more than that. So yeah. Next thing is, which networks should we use? So we know which ad units, we're sort of testing like when we want to show them. But now, which are the best ad networks per ad unit? And again, I think this will be very different per game, per genre, and all that. And you should definitely research, ask around. But from our experience, we would say, interstitials, your top ones are probably AdMob, Unity, Facebook, Mopub, AppLovin, rewarded video. These are your top Unity, Facebook, AdMob, Iron Source. And then with banners, I'd say these four we would highly recommend. And actually recently, I would say in the last 6 months, 8 months, we've seen a lot of upside from Unity. And so they've grown a tremendous amount. We were very pleasantly surprised. So highly recommend checking them out. And so the next question now is, okay, we have a couple ad networks we're working with. How do we show ads such that we have a good auction, we run a good auction, and get the highest CPM we can get, right? So CPMs are already softening because of COVID-19 and advertisers aren't spending as much. How do we increase our CPM to counter that? It's really to improve your ad mediation. So I'd say typically you want to be using 4 to 7 ad networks and 3 placements each. And so here's an example of an A/B test waterfall that you could try out. So for example, Facebook $18, AdMob sort of typo $16, MoPub 14, AppLovin 12, IronSource 10, and then sort of your sort of snake round robin back to Facebook, AdMob, and you then sort of run this for 2 weeks, see what the CPM is, and then change it to another waterfall and run it again. Some mediation providers such as IronSource, they'll allow you to run simultaneous A/B tests, and that would be very nifty and be able to compare your CPMs with different waterfall pricings to maximize your ad revenue. And then, so as I alluded earlier, I'd say ad mediation providers, the big ones in the market. IronSource, this is what we use for hyper casual games. It's easy to set up, easy to use. I would say if you're new to IronSource, watch out. Make sure you're using manual waterfall and not the auto optimize. So when we first used it, we made a mistake and we set it to auto optimize, and when we fixed that, we got a 50% boost in CPM. So make sure you have that setting correct. I'd say other really good ad mediation solutions are AdMob. We're currently testing them. Really excited with their RTB and live CPM solutions. MoPub is really good as well. They're open source. I think they have the best transparency. And then AppLovin Max, also another potential solution. The next in the survival tactic is to get free things. So now with COVID-19, a lot of large companies are being extra supportive, and Facebook and Google have announced. Facebook announced $100 million for small, medium businesses, ad credits. And so here's a link for you to submit an application, and you would get a couple $1,000s of Facebook ad credits. And likewise, same thing with Google. They announced over 300 million in ad credits, and all of these are to help small, medium businesses where it's not as easy to get funding, and these times are challenging. And so, highly recommend everybody to apply to these programs. And then, aside from that, I'd say is figuring out what are the good tools out there that are free to use. First one is Asana. It's free for under 15 people. We've been using Asana for 8 years. It's great for project management, really, really good for agile development, and 2 to 3 week sprints. So highly recommend Asana. Slack, I think, is pretty ubiquitous now, and a lot of people have used this, and but so very quickly, it's the best instant messaging platform. It's free plan actually for unlimited users. They charge per integration, so it's highly recommend Slack. Localytics, unfortunately, it's no longer free for 10,000 monthly active users. Maybe you could try emailing customer support and getting I know they do have trials though. Localytics is what we use. We use it for analytics and marketing, their SDK, and we can build custom dashboards. We can analyze funnels, and we also send push notifications via Localytics. We can A/B test push notifications and see which messaging has a higher open rate. And we actually really think that it's the best sort of all-in-one solution that is easy to learn, especially for small companies and indie teams. Next up is Delta DNA. They got bought by Unity, and I would say Delta DNA is very, very similar to Localytics, but they're a little bit more advanced. You can write like SQL queries and do deeper analysis. And so if your team is more technical, I would highly recommend Delta DNA. Whereas if your team is less technical on the programming side and MySQL, Localytics would be the way to go. Next up is for Tenjin. Once you get the free ad credits and you're running UA campaigns and UA tests, highly recommend Tenjin. They're the best platform for mobile MMPs. And what this tool does is it allows you to see how much you're spending per campaign and what your ROI is, right? So if I'm spending $100 on this campaign, what is the revenue I'm receiving from this campaign? Is it $80, in which case we're losing money, or is it $120, in which case we're making money and we should continue, right? And Tenjin has a free tier up to 1 million events per month, and you can analyze cohort LTVs. And it's great, very easy to use. Lastly is fundraising challenges during these times. When maybe publishers aren't as open to taking calls and all of that. Our tactic here is to just do whatever it takes to stay alive. I think first off is it's really, really hard to succeed. It's a long journey. And so don't get discouraged, don't give up. Pleey started in 2004. They launched Township in 2014, and then Homescapes and then Gardenscapes and Homescapes after that. And so it really, really takes a long time to succeed. So hang in there. Rovio started in 2003. The first big hit was 6 years later with Angry Birds in 2009. Niantic with Pokemon Go. They started 2010. They made Ingress, a lot of location-based games. It was really only Pokemon Go in 2016 that took off. There's actually an article, I forget which news outlet reported, and they asked the Pokemon Go or Niantic founder that, how did you get like an overnight success? And actually, he said, well, I've been working on location-based services for 20 years. And likewise with us, we started 2008. Initially, it was part-time, and then later became full-time. And Pictoword, was in 2013, right? So it really, really takes time to succeed. And so don't give up. The next one is, of course, managing studio finances. I think it's really, really important to read contracts carefully, like when you're working with ad networks. Make sure you negotiate terms where you're paid earlier. So typically, sometimes the ad network contracts will say net 60 or net 90. So both of which are very, very painful for indie studios our size and small. So like net 90 is like, the revenue that you earn in August, you won't receive it until December 1st, right? So like 90 days after the end of the month. So definitely talk to them and try to negotiate for net 50, net 30. So on a cash flow basis, you're able to, pay for expenses. Next one is to make sure you verify your ad revenue. Make sure that the ad networks you work with, like the number, like the impressions is not sort of too far off. Like we've worked with, in some cases, we've seen sort of 20% discrepancies in terms of like the number of impressions that we're seeing and that they're reporting. So that's something that's really, really important to call out and iron out. And next one is consider using Upwork for part-time outsourcing. If you can't, afford to hire somebody full-time because of the uncertainty, hiring part-time and Upwork is definitely a viable way to go. And lastly is bank loans. From our experience, it is a lot harder now to talk to publishers and talk to VCs. And so we ended up going the bank loan route. And banks, some banks now are a little bit more receptive to talking to gaming companies. I think maybe even like a year ago, when we approached banks, they would be like, "Oh, gaming is too risky, it's too hit based." But I think now with this environment where people are staying home, they're seeing our business or our industry as being more resilient, so they're more open-minded about it. Next one is, it's a lot of hard work, stay alive, a lot of hard work. Gaming is very competitive, prepare yourself for 60-hour work weeks. And it's really about like learning as fast as you can, learning art, sound, coding, finance, ASO, paid UA, paid user acquisition, monetization, publishing, and all of that. You'll end up doing a ton of experiments, and most of them would fail. Right. So if you're starting off and you're A/B testing this this ad monetization waterfall, or for A/B testing this game system and feature, and you find that it's going nowhere, that's normal. 95% of our experiments go nowhere too. So we're all in the same boat. And then lastly, especially mobile, it's very, very metrics driven. And so you'll need to constantly improve your game, constantly improve retention and all that, and re-engage users. Next thing is, building a team that you can have fun with. I think this is absolutely critical. If you love sort of the team that the people you work with, you can sort of go on forever and never give up and go through all the roller coasters and all the hard times. You'll be spending them, like 8 to 12 hours a day with them. And so find people you enjoy working with. Imagine if you're in a 12-hour car ride with this person, would you enjoy that ride, right? And if yes, great. If no, I think you should rethink who you work with. And this has been huge for us. As an example, the co-founders I work with, Solon, I've known him for 25 years. We're middle school buddies. Middle school and high school best friends. John, my co-founder, we're college best friends. I've known him for 15 years plus. And Sue is my parents' friend. She runs our Taiwan office with 6 people, and I've known her for 25 plus years, right? So I think working with people that you enjoy working with is absolutely the most important thing. And so I think here's a little bit of my contact information. Always love to keep in touch. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. If you have any feedback on these slides, feel free to let me know as well. I think this leaves us for 3 minutes of questions, right, Stefan? Or
yes, exactly. So we have about 3 minutes for Q&A. I don't see a lot of questions. I guess you were very, very clear in your approach and very instructive, to say the least. I might have one question or 2 questions if the audience if they don't have any question. First is for you, do you see this COVID situation and environment more as an opportunity for indie studios to stand out, or do you see it more as a threat? And go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would say, a little bit of both, but I would say overall it would be an opportunity. Downloads are, at an all-time high. And so with indie studios like us, where we can't, bid high CPIs and all of that, we're able to get more organic traffic, and, people are on social media much more. And so I'd highly recommend sort of sharing on social media as well. So if you have a game, allow people to share on Twitter, share on Facebook. And you'll be able to get more traffic that way. And so because there's more eyeballs now, I really think that this is an opportunity for us to be able to, get users to play our games and, get them to fall in love with our games and stay.
That's pretty good. Thank you. Last question, if we have time, maybe we'll have a little bit more than a minute. Very fast, what are the learnings and tactics that you developed during COVID and you would keep post-COVID?
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest one would be the live events. Prior to this, we were running maybe 1 live event a month, and now we're running 10, and we're seeing, ARPDAU, revenue per daily active users go up a tremendous amount, 20-30%. And we also use it as a really good way to test certain game modes. So this month, our game mode could be, slightly different, tweaks to our game. So we're able to do it in an event, in a controlled event, so that in case, we screwed up and metrics are bad or people complain, we can just say, oh, sorry, it's an accident, we're rolling back, next event will be something else. And so live event has been a pretty a big learning for us during this past 3 months that we're going to be keeping for forever.
All right, thank you. I think we have some comments there. Thank you. They all thank you for your amazing tips and advice for the crowd, and they're really happy with your presentation. So thank you very much. And obviously, people can still reach out to you if they have other questions, and they can go to the game room chat where we can also answer more questions. Thank you very much.
Definitely.
And have a good night. It's late for you.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, bye.
Bye.